Ladies and gentlemen, we gather today with hearts and minds aligned to welcome a visionary, brilliant and kind, a poet at heart, a pioneer in thought, whose words awaken, whose wisdom is sought. Professor G. Balasubramanian stands with grace, a leader who has shaped the academic space. From CBSE halls to global acclaim, he now guides us through the learning's flame. Today, he leads us bright and free from neurodiversity to neuroplasticity. Let's listen, let's learn, let's be stirred by the power of his every word. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for Professor G. Balasubramanian.
Sairam to all of you. My loving pranams and salutations at the lotus feet of Bhagwan, whose singular grace has made this day possible for me as well as all of you. Well, friends, when I was asked by Dr. Saurabh that I should be able to speak on leadership for neurodiversity to neuroplasticity, I agreed initially, but then I started introspecting, because the topic of neurodiversity and neuroplasticity is still on the fluid stage as far as the schools are concerned. While the awareness about these topics are still, is still inadequate among the school heads as well as the teachers. If I'm going to talk about this leadership in neuroplasticity, what should I be speaking about? If someone asks me a question, sir, you are going to speak about an ideal. How are we going to translate that ideal into action? I was confused. I didn't know what to do. I just went to my bookshelf and picked up a book. That book was on leadership, published by Sathya Central Trust. And the first sentence I got in that was that leadership is idealism in action. And therefore, I think we are all absolutely in line with what Swami has given us the direction. And to me, this is not a mere conference, as somebody pointed out. It is not a mere convention. It is, to me, a big initiative that we have taken to transform the future. And this requires soldiers, warriors, brand ambassadors and leaders, and I find here more than 1,000 soldiers, warriors, leaders, as well as brand ambassadors. And the question is that leaders may come and go, but the objective for all of us is to create a leadership, because the leadership survives. And what neuroplasticity and neurodiversity requires today is leadership. And therefore, all of us need to be engaged in the process of developing a leadership for this particular concept. This takes me to a very interesting event, which happened about nearly 30 years back when I was visiting a school in Meerut. And I was addressing the students of secondary classes on what is the objective of education, what is the purpose of education. And after the program was over, one of the students in the Q&A session stood up and asked me a question. Sir, in the last 15 minutes, you have been talking about education, and during that time, you used two words. One was education, the other was Vidya. Are they same? And my 30 to 40 years of experience crumbled in no time, because I was not in a position to give a reply immediately. It made me to introspect and went back and started looking at that. When you look at education, the root of the word is from educere, that means to bring out what is inside. And when you talk of Vidya, Vidya is a process of nurturing what is inside so that it blossoms out. Therefore, the forces which are operating between education and Vidya are probably forces which are inverse. And no wonder in India we said education, sa vidyaya vimuktiye, education is that which liberates. But then what happens is that now we are mistaken between schooling and education. Schooling is a process, and education is a vision. Is a national vision, is a community vision, is a social vision, and we try to, clip the vision into a schooling process. Therefore, we have a serious conflict in schools today. We are preparing the children for certification and qualification. In that process, the education is suffering. No wonder we have the inclusive concept is very much underplayed in schools. It's time for us to understand that the concept of schooling has got to be more enlarged. It has to accommodate better visions of education. We are in a very fast-changing world. The children are thinking differently. I want to share with you another experience, the second experience, a couple of years back when I was addressing the students on on the career growth. One of the students stood up and asked me a question, which I found it was silly. But then it was very provoking. After my talk for about 15 minutes, he asked me a question. Sir, where do you buy your milk? I was surprised. What that has to do with the topic? Sir, please answer. I said, I buy it from a milk booth. Then he said, where do you buy your medicines? I said, from a drug shop. Again, went further, where do you buy cosmetics? I was getting irritated. So I asked him, yes, I buy from a supermarket. Sir, when you buy your milk, you go to a milk shop, booth. When you buy your drugs, you buy from a drugstore. And when you buy your cosmetics, you buy from the shop. Why do you expect me to go to the same school for physics, chemistry, and biology? Are we moving towards Americanization of education? Probably if it happens, we will be able to accommodate neurodiversity and neuroplasticity. Friends, please do remember that our understanding and our operability of the concepts of education demands a serious change. I also would like to take to you some kind of mindsets that we have about the children who are neurodivergent. It takes me to a very interesting experience somewhere in 1985 when I was a joint controller of examinations in the board. When a candidate from Port Blair approached us, he had some neural challenges, and he approached us for an amnesiasis, the script writer. And we were willing to give the permission, but he wanted a little different. He said, sir, instead of a person who will write my answers, can I have a typist who will type the answers that I do? But that was not in the framework, but somehow we had a lot of deliberation. We allowed the student to, have a person who would type the answer. And the boy was appearing in class 12, and the subject was political science, so the paper was, evaluated. This boy scored 97 out of 100, which was the second highest mark in the board. And then what happened? Everybody raised eyebrows. How could it happen? After all, he is a boy who has been given an amnesiasis. We don't expect him to get that much of a mark. So the student was put under unfair means. I still remember. And then the committee came there, and we wanted to recreate the situation. And in the committee, the student was asked to have a typist, and he started dictating the answer, at which my typist could not get the answer typed at the speed. And you wouldn't believe, beyond the question paper, he was able to answer all the questions raised by the committee. So it very clearly indicated that we had a biased mindset. Right? And I think that's a very important case. What is leadership? Leadership today is about moving from a biased mindset, estimating the competencies of children as much below what we do. That's the whole problem. And I believe that in a large number of cases, they excel than what we do. Probably the performances you saw yesterday, the performance you saw this morning was evident to the fact that they have exceptional competencies which we fail to understand. When we talk about educational leadership, why we are afraid to change, why we do not want to change, I've got 5 reasons which I think is very important to understand. One, the current educational leadership is a gift of industrial model. And that's exactly we inherited, and for decades together, and for the last 70 years post-independence, we have not changed from that model. We are, preparing children as a mass drill for a community, and therefore our approach to inclusivity has been biased, and we are marginalizing the students, who are challenged in the classroom. Second, is that the current leadership styles do not address value creation because we are all in the process of completing a syllabus. We are covering the syllabus rather than discovering the syllabus. We are not trying to understand the competency and potential of the child, every child. In that process, our, the humanistic approach to education is very much lacking. And I think when I go into the schools, we treat them as customers rather than, the flesh and blood. I remember a famous statement of Rabindranath Tagore, who said, every child comes with a message that God is not a discourager of man. Right? Our hope is with the children, and I think the way we approach our school system is it has to be changed. As a matter of fact, today when I find schools, the heads of institutions, large number of schools, they are very inclusive to the extent they want to have more number of awards to their credit, more number of awards to their schools, and showcase them in the school reception hall, rather than open up their mind and be inclusive with regard to the children. This scenario has to change. The current model focuses on personal institutional branding. I think, when we admit a child who is little divergent, what will happen to my school examination results? What will happen to the average mark that they are producing? So we have some, mindsets which really curtails us from what we need to do, how much of compassion we should have for the students who are being recruited. The fourth important factor that I find is the current leadership subscribes to divisive process and inclusive processes, because a convenient pedagogy, I want you to know this term, rather than learning convenience. A pedagogy today is undergoing different models which will suit the teacher, which will suit the administrative convenience of the school, rather than which will, facilitate the children. Our professor was talking about the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic children, and I very often go and interact with teachers in the classroom. I said, how do you have your lesson plan or that? It is a lesson plan made 5 years before, 10 years before, and you incorporate it. You just don't want to move from what is already established there. I think this also needs a correction. The fifth point, which I think is that the current educational leadership does not nurture cognitive processes in the classroom. It discourages cognitive dissonance. I think it's a very important thing. Very often you go to the teachers and ask them, what is the cognitive process involved in your lesson plan or in your pedagogy? I'm sorry, please don't mistake me. They need to be educated on that. Our methods of training need to undergo, because we have been following the classical model of content preparation for the children, for the teachers, and I think the teachers need to be little more pedagogically intelligent. I think when Howard Gardner, when he came to India and he was delivering a lecture, he said, all my 9 or 10 intelligences do not matter unless my teacher has got a pedagogical intelligence in the class. 9 intelligences are of no use. I think pedagogical intelligence is a very important thing which we need to create. On the contrary, when you look at the Indian Gurukula system, it encouraged, celebrated diversity in learning, right? Customized learning. Every child was a little different. The entire process of learning was different. I remember a very famous quote from Mahabharata when Arjuna goes to Bhishma and asks him, when will my learning be complete? And Bhishma tells him, right? Acharya Padamadattate. 1/4 of your learning comes from the teacher. Padam Sumedhyaya, that you will learn 25% by self-study. Padam Swarbrahmacharihi, you will have to interact with others, peer learning, and then learn it. Padam Kalakramenahi, experiential learning. So they never expected the learning to be encompassed into a classroom of 40 minutes. I think that's a tragedy that we have in this classroom today. Ladies and gentlemen, neurodiversity needs better understanding. That's the first thing, that we need to create an awareness and understanding about the neurodiversity. First is acceptance and of inclusivity as a natural process rather than a trusted process. It envisions the right of the learner and frugal compassion. Oh, I have already given to them this concession, that concession. Sorry, it's not a concession. It's a right that they have, and I think we will have to assert on the kind of the rights. That's where the principal's role comes in, and therefore we have a saying in India, Yatha Raja Tata Praja. So unless you have a leader in the school who is able to be compassionate, to be inclusive, you will not be able to have the teachers in the school over there. They need to understand that one size doesn't fit all. Friends, neurodiversity focuses on the learnability of the learner. I think this is a very important thing I have been deliberating for years. Thanks to the national education policy, which is much more broad, encompassing today. We started with the learning-centric curriculum, child-centric curriculum, a teacher-centric curriculum, and then what happens today is the learnability of the learner. That's the essence of your neurodiversity. The learnability of the learner is much different from the learning that happens in the classroom. And therefore, the classroom should have a buffet approach where the learnability of the learners have got to be facilitated. I think this is a very important thing that both curriculum and pedagogy should address to facilitating the learnability of the learner in the classroom. Friends, the question is neurodiversity engages this customized approach in class. We are prepared to have customized approach over there, but I think the technology today, especially with the kind of artificial intelligence and others we have a very beneficial platform where all our divergent children and inclusive children and the concept of neuroplasticity can be accommodated with ease and comfort. It's time that we move in that direction. So neurodiversity calls for two things. One, co-construction of knowledge and skills. That's the future, right? I think today what we call, we have a curriculum which is being thrust from the top. I saw one of the slides earlier. I think our Dr. Saurabh was talking about how a child was reacting to a particular communication card which was produced over there. I think we need to discuss, take our children into confidence in designing the curriculum and the pedagogy. How many teachers are willing to go and discuss with children? Am I able to convey to you, discuss with you? And I think this kind of interactive pedagogy is very, very important. And as the brain sciences will indicate, repetition and spaced repetition is a very important aspect of educating the children who have neurodiversity, and also to expand, reinforce the concept of learning that comes to. So self-expression today, that's a very important thing. Most of the neurodivergent children need to express themselves, need to communicate themselves, and unfortunately many of us teachers, so don't mistake me, I'm also a teacher, therefore we are unwilling to listen. We want to trust things over there. The listening competencies of teachers need to expand there. We need to acknowledge the learner's strengths and limits, as well as encourage individual and personal competence of the learner. That's a very important thing. Our whole education system has not grown or has brought low because we have not accommodated the personal competence of the children. We are in a hierarchical top-down approach model rather than bottom to top model. I think that is the crux of the problem. I'm sure the way they have exhibited the support systems and scaffolding systems are indicative that they have taken cognizance of all these things. Neuroplasticity empowers re-engineering. I think this is a very important thing. In the future, that learners will choose what they would learn rather than what the curriculum or what schools will provide. We should be ready for that. When you talk about the future of learning, I'm a bit scared when I read books by people like Michio Kaku on the future of learning or the future of mindset. I get scared. What will be the size of the classroom? What will be the shape of the classroom? What will be the kind of learning technology is going to impact us? I think that is a challenge that we are going to face. So, coming to the last one or two slides of mine, I think classroom environment should support multisensory learning, growth mindset, knowledge creation, and knowledge enterprise. If this has to happen, is my principal willing to facilitate my teachers to do that? They have a linear model, what Sue said, what is administratively convenient. I think, therefore, the whole edifice of our pedagogy in the classroom has got to undergo a change. That is where the leadership comes through. Ladies and gentlemen, technology can today function as an enabler for neurodiversity. Huge opportunities exist, but unfortunately, we either misuse or abuse technology, or rather than use technology in an effective mode. I think our purposes are very important in designing technology, in using technology. So what should what should the leadership look forward to? I think we need to disruptive thinking about education. We have moved from changing, I always talk about change in leadership, then transformation in leadership. I think the time is today for disruptive leadership, right? We will have to consciously change a few things so that the society becomes more inclusive, learning becomes more inclusive, and we have a happy environment in the school. Second, we need teacher education curriculum that understands and focuses neural learning. It's very unfortunate. It's painful when I see the teacher curriculum even today. We say that we are dealing with the brain of the children without knowing what happens inside the brain, right? It's unfortunate. So we need to go into our teacher curriculum. There are sporadic references about all these things, but I think an intensive moduling is very important in the teacher curriculum. Third, the training programs across the country, that most of the training programs, which as far as I know, except a few, are very traditional, and I think it's time that we need specialized training programs. As a matter of fact, I would recommend that at least 50% of the teachers in each school should be trained on inclusive education, and also on the heads of institutions, the leaders should be able to provide them freedom to operate in the classroom. I think that's a very painful thing, right? Sometimes we go and sit in the classroom. Have you completed point 1 of the lesson plan, point 2 of the lesson plan, point 3 of the lesson plan? I'm sorry, time has come that we need to move a little beyond that in order to accommodate the emotions of the children. The emotions and the learnings of the children are not being adequately accommodated. We need 50% of teachers in all schools to be empowered in the special education program. So, to conclude, what is required for effective education leadership? Need for disruptive thinking, need for transformational leadership, and need for inclusive thought architecture. Now we are talking about inclusive processes, but it should start with the thought architecture of the school, the design of the school, and the conceptual description of the school. It should start. So, friends, at the institutional level, a more humanistic approach, a diversified and inclusive pedagogy, a non-judgmental celebration of human competencies, and facilitating growth mindset and moving away from survival mindset. This is a big problem today. 90% of the schools are in a survival mindset, competing with each other. Right? I think we need to move from competition and consumerism to constructive curriculum, constructive pedagogy. So, it is not our differences that divide us, it is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences. I think that is one big challenge. Sir, I want to do all these things, sir, but you know what kind of environment I have? How much I can do that? And I think that's where I have Bernard Shaw, who says, people are always blaming their circumstances for what they are. I do not believe in circumstances. The people who get on this world are the people who get up and look for circumstances they want. And if they cannot find them, they create them. Vidya Vahini is probably doing that. My last slide for you. When you go back to the school, all heads of institutions, all leaders see, what is the acreage of the school? 5 acres, because affiliation 2 acres minimum. How many classrooms? How many air-conditioned rooms? We have been looking at the landscape of the school. A school needs to be examined at its mindscape and not the landscape. What is my vision 5 years now, 4 years now? I think that is the future of leadership, which will include neurodiversity and neuroplasticity. Thank you for a patient listening. Yeah. My salutations to the Swami for this opportunity. Thank you.
May I now request Shri P. Hariharan and Shri V.L. Subramaniam to felicitate Professor G. Balasubramanian in recognition of his remarkable contribution. Thank you, sir.